identities and structures, right? So the system has created that, right? And so when we went through and we were doing it, and we go through, so I do the initial pipeline, which is typical APs, and I do multi-year pipeline, right? And that's when I explicitly ask, what about your dean of students? Right? I ask, what about them? And again, people just don't pause. No one forces them to have this conversation and say, who are they beyond the dean of students? Right? If you're thinking of their career trajectory, you're thinking of the success of the school, when people pause and think about, often that person's holding down the culture of the school, right? There's real leadership that is actually being exhibited, and when people don't have the space to stop and think with enough advance notice to then be able to say, like, one of the person's great principal right now in New York started as a behavior interventionist, right? And his principal said, I see potential in you, right? And now we're gonna have a gradual process. So the biggest thing I do is I name it and I just give the facts from my own experience, which is we overestimated the role of academic leadership as the only skill that's required, and we underestimated people leadership and school culture. There's talent sitting in your building right now, and if we take advantage of it now, and so then in the spring, we say, like typically people have career conversations in the winter because they want to retain you. I have them in the spring, because then I want to ask you, how are the roles and responsibilities going to change next year, right? So how do you have, and even if it's a flex, and part of it is you also need to have the dialogue with the person, right? What are your long-term, right? Some of the things for me when I first started at my first school was, I wanted to be a social worker. I was going to go be a social worker. And she was like, I think you're going to want to run the school that you're a social worker of. You should really think about leadership, right? So who are the people who are seeing that and breathing in, I'm not going to force you into this role, but I want to let you know I see potential that this could be a role. That's one of the biggest things that you can do, right? Because so often people aren't even thinking that way. So I would say it's the explicit conversation I have with them, and then if you're kind of at the district level, it's asking about that talent and what can we do to grow that talent over time. So they are not stagnant. And then longer term, kind of in my change management, it was how do we redesign the role? That I think there is a way to have a dean of school culture role that is a systems leader, that is building skill, in the same way you have an operations leader, that's not them directly just engaging with kids, right? How are they managing? Like, those are all skills principals have. What's the goal? How am I managing the system? What's progress? And part of it is making that shift, that they're not the person who's managing the behavior, but they're the people who are help managing systems. And so I would say that's a two-pronged strategy to lead that change. That was actually one of the things I was very passionate about. If you ask me, I remember I met with a leader who was leading equity, and I was a dean at the time. She's like, dean of students is one of the most racist roles. And I was like, thank you for putting words.